Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
What is some weird stuff that you've seen in the woods? Post stories and pics.
I got one. It happened late last year. Just the first snow in our mountains. A friend and I went hiking. We went to a local national park. It was a good time and we had fun seeing wildlife and that kind of stuff. After we left the park though, my friend wanted to go on another trail. One we had been to before to eat MREs outside the park. It's a densely wooded area and the trail follows a small river into a gorge the locals like to swim in. I was unsure about stopping because it was getting dark, but we were both hungry and MREs are pretty good, so we went anyway. As a lurker of X and K, I made a joke about needing a password just in case one of us was replaced by a skinwalker. Anyways, we got to the trailhead, but it was closed with a sign that said there was bear and mountain lion sightings. But my friend knew of another trailhead a short ways away. We made it to the river and were eating out of tasty field rations. When it obviously got dark, we were cleaning up and smoking, just about to head back up the trail when we heard something moving. Not too weird in the forest, I know, but this trail was closed. We didn't see anyone here and it sounded bigger than a small animal. I thought it might have been a black bear attracted by the food. Black bears are fairly small around here and we were both armed, so we didn't worry too much. However, it wasn't a black bear or a mountain lion. As we were walking away, we kept hearing it follow us, always at a distance and always just out of sight. My friend thought it was somebody messing with us and yelled at them to fuck off. Then whatever it was roared. I've heard bears, mountain lions, and even actually lions roar in person, and it didn't sound like that. This sounded different, bigger, more primal. So obviously we ran like cowards back to his truck and drove off. I didn't see what it was. Never got a good look at it, but I've been to those woods before and trust me, that was no normal animal.
My older brother and I were walking a trail we'd been on a dozen times in the woods surrounding our property. The trail goes about a mile up to the second highest point in the whole county, northeast Texas. About 2/3 of the way up, sitting in the middle of the clearing, was a weird little creature like a baby bird, but round as a basketball with a huge throat like a frog's. It was pink, brown like a newborn animal, and was making squawking sounds. From what I could see, it wasn't able to support itself on its small legs and was basically rolling around on its back. We got about 15 feet from it and everything felt wrong. We both felt extreme fight or flight and got the fuck out of there. Afterward, we reasoned that it must have been a baby eagle or owl, and our FOF had to have come from an unconscious fear of its mother returning. But I've never seen a picture of anything that resembles it. It felt like something we shouldn't have seen at all. Oh, and another story from living on that same property. My dog started barking like a lunatic, so my stepdad and I went outside to see what it was. She was across the street from our mailbox, acting like she'd penned something in a tree. We had a big 10,000 candle power spotlight and shined it on something that I can only describe as a hairless, 9 feet tall giraffe with a thick neck. We were about 30 feet from it, but it was clearly alive, moving its head back and forth between us and my dog. It had big, black eyes. I asked my stepdad, "What the fuck is that?" And he just started laughing and told me to run and get the shotgun. I did, and when I returned, the thing was still standing in the trees, peering over the thick brambles, and my dog was still losing her mind. My stepdad said not to shoot it and wouldn't answer me when I kept asking him what it was. Eventually it dropped out of the spotlight and my dog chased it into the woods, coming back after a few minutes panting really hard.
What color was the giraffe thing? I had some jet black creatures lurking at the start of my tree line before. It had 16 inches eye gap and big eyes. It absorbed tactical flashlight light. You neuronically saw an alien 2 weeks before it, and it felt like it was a test to see if I'd shoot whatever the fuck the black thing was. I'd been seeing orbs before and after these events, so I'm curious if it's related.
This was all the way back in 2008 or 9, but I remember it being a yellow, gray color. I say giraffe because I couldn't see the bottom half and the top half was like 4 feet of neck. The only real explanation I could think of for what it could have been is a deer standing on its hind legs. But this thing was too tall and its eyes were way too big for a deer. I distinctly remember seeing the light from the spotlight reflected in big black eyes. Stepdad still brings it up and makes fun of me for freaking out about it to this day. But when I ask him, "Okay, asshole, what was it then?" he just shrugs.
My dad has to go to his doctor once a week, so 2 weeks ago I took him, and while I was waiting for about 2 hours, I decided to walk around the area. The place is just out of the city in a much smaller rural town. This area in particular surrounded by commercial medical properties, like a women's hospital, urology clinic, drugstore, etc. Next to the drugstore there's a big open field that leads down the hill toward the hospital, but it's undeveloped, with a few trees here and there. I found some bleached animal bones. It looked like it was a deer of some kind. However, I came back a week later and the bones were gone. Maybe it got cleaned up, but it really didn't look like any work was being done in that open field.
I ain't got a picture. I've got a few stories. Told most of them before. Even had a few of them show up in some YouTube videos. But I'll post one just for shits and giggles. Be me in summer 2019. Some friends of mine want to go camping in the Uintas. Friend of mine, who I'll call Ethan, says he knows a good spot pretty close to parking. Something like a quarter-mile from the parking to the camping spot. Me and my other friend, who I'll call Pete, pack a ton of shit, since we figure it's gonna be an easy walk. Get to the camping area. Turns out the parking area is about 1.5 miles from the campsite. So we decided we're gonna make multiple trips to make things easier on ourselves, since we got nothing but time. The area we were in had a trail with a river and some ponds on one side, a birch grove, and then a small pond and a forested area on the other side. We make it to the campsite and start setting up our stuff. Pete and Ethan decide to just set the tent on the ground, without actually setting it up. I tell them it's gonna rain and we should set it up, but they insist it'll be fine. Start hiking back down to the cars. About halfway there it starts to rain. Tell Pete and Ethan that they're dumbasses. About 3/4 of the way back, Ethan hits me on the shoulder and points across the ponds at the birch grove and says,
Dude, do you see that?
Look at where he's pointing and see a very tall, very skinny thing with skin the color of the birch trees staring at us from behind a tree. Its head is topped by some sort of branches or antlers. We ask Pete if he can see it, but he doesn't even notice at all. So we decide we must be seeing things. Make it to the car, grab some of our stuff and start the trip back. About halfway back, Pete stops dead in his tracks and says,
"Holy fuck, wait, is that the thing you were talking about?"
We see the same creature as before, behind a different tree a bit closer to shore. We're kind of freaked out, but we all took paid time off for this trip, and we're pretty decently armed, so we decided to stay. Make a few more trips to the car and back, see the creature every time, moving between different trees in the grove. Set up camp, tent is completely flooded and fucked. Tell Pete and Ethan that they're dumbasses again. Start cooking some dinner and drinking. Eventually we forget about the creepy critter and just start vibing. Decided to turn in. There's a bit of a dry area so we sleep there, though the whole night my hand was in a puddle of water, so I have trouble sleeping. Ethan and Pete are wasted and fall asleep right away. I have a hard time sleeping, so I'm awake for a while. Around 1.5 hours or so after we turn in, I hear what sounds like a deer walking through our camp. We're in the mountains in Utah, so deer, elk, and even moose are pretty common. Ignore it, try to sleep. As time goes on, the steps get louder, and new footsteps join the others. Pete and Ethan are still out cold. It sounds like there's an entire herd of elk outside. Literally dozens of sets of steps. Say fuck it, grab my gun, hop out of the tent. The second I leave the tent, the footsteps stop. Scan the camp and trees, don't see shit. I sit down next to the fire and drink some of the whiskey we left by it. Get back in the tent and eventually manage to fall asleep. Tell Pete and Ethan about the footsteps. They're a little spooked, but we have like 5 or 6 more guys coming out that day. When our bigger friend group gets there, we decide to go check out the birch grove and see what it could have been. We don't see anything that we could have mistaken for that creature. No fallen trees, no weird modern art, no meth addicts standing on each other's shoulders, no deer on their hind legs. These trees were pretty fucking tall too, like the shortest was 12+ feet. And whatever this thing was, it was as tall as the trees were. Freaked out, but whatever it was, it didn't seem to want to harm us and decided to stay. It helps that we have 8-ish people now. We stayed another 3 nights and nothing else weird happened. Anticlimactic, I know, but it was still one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced. And there were 2 other people who witnessed it too. Not even sure what word could be used to describe it. Maybe like a Wendigo, but more in the modern internet conception, not the original cannibal spirit native lore.
One time I was taking a drive in the countryside at night. Then I came up on this giant gate next to the road that had a trail leading to this woman sitting in a white dress with a red glowing light all around her in this pocket of flat land in the tree line. I could see all this from the road easily. I tried my best to get a video or picture of it, but my camera didn't pick up the red light and also would be blurry no matter how much I tried to make the pic clear. I gave up and drove the hell out of there because I got such a feeling of dread from it and I didn't want whatever was going on out there to start coming at the car. The last time I drove that way during the daytime, there was no trail in the area where the girl was sitting, wasn't there? There were trees in the circle she was in. I'm still scared to go on that road.
I'm the Anon who talked about seeing a ghost in my college cafeteria. I was drunk as F when I wrote that. So thanks to the guy on YouTube who fixed my spelling errors. Anyways, I have an Innawoods story that happened several months back I'd like to share. The first part of this story takes place around the time of the ghost sighting, but they aren't connected. Be me, sophomore in college. This was around the time the killer clown craze was popular. I was hanging with my stoner friends. We were sitting on our buddy's porch hitting a hookah. It was around 2 or 3 in the morning when we heard an ice cream truck song playing about a mile away. Later, I found out it was most likely some dipshit frat boy trolling our town. However, a week later, it was Halloween on campus and we were dicking around. Our pack leader, the guy whose porch we crashed on, used the holiday as an excuse to tote around a baseball bat like some gangster. Kinda glad he did because we were heading back to one of our rooms when we saw a guy dressed up as a fucking killer clown, holding a butcher knife. The mad lad, who looks like Captain Lou, began petting his bat and stared down the clown, which scared the fuck out of the clown and he ran off. Nothing much was thought about that until 2020. I was recording a rap video for some dude I had classes with. The music sucked ass, but it gave me a chance to produce something right before the pandemic started. He said I should record shots of this bike trail in town that apparently had occult shit going on. Of course, I was skeptical, but I listened anyway. He said there was this cult on campus that have been sacrificing cats since the 80s. For some reason, the killer clown stuff had something to do with the cult. Keep in mind I never told him about the clown encounter. He also said if you look into the cult, people around campus will try and silence you. I recorded some shots of the bike trail. No sacrifices that day. Skip ahead to a few months back. I took another visit to the bike trail. Begin to notice occult symbols painted on trees down the trail. My first instinct was that they were markings by loggers, but in the middle of the woods. I head back to my place. A few weeks later, I brought a couple of my high school buddies along to the trail. I tell them the story. They think I'm full of shit. I show them the symbols. I noticed this homemade wreath made of twigs with a bone tied in it. Hold up.jpg. It was dangling on a tree branch high enough that nobody would normally see it. Autism saves the day. MP4. We take the wreath from the branch like teens in a schlock horror film. The bone looks like a femur, too big for an animal bone. My buddy decided to bring the wreath with us. A couple minutes later, we see this lady walking towards us from the other end of the trail. It wasn't weird until she stopped when she saw us, waved, and speed walked back. Okay, we finally got to the end of the trail. That's when we find the fucking ritual site the rapper told me about. I thought he was fucking with me, but no. Jesus statue with a medium-sized rock in front of it, surrounded by barbed wire and police tape. I began freaking out a little bit. We get closer to the site. Not much happens after, but it does get creepy. Here's one of the symbols. Looks like the Blair Witch logo. It could be trolls or LARPers, but the wreath in the site. Here's the wreath we found. Like I said, the skeptic in me can't make heads or tails of this whole ordeal. Here's the proof that I'm telling the truth at the very least.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember that all videos have been archived on the Odyssey page.